Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Screenstars. I'm here today to bring you my review for the 2014 Conjuring Universe film, Annabelle. The film's directed by John R. Leonetti, and it stars Annabelle Wallis, Ward Horton, Alfie Woodard, and Tony Amendola. Right, the film follows a young married couple, Mia and John. Mia's pregnant. They're living in the suburbs. They're very happy, very settled. She collects dolls, and they are all displayed in the nursery and things like that, ready for the baby to come along. And her husband, as a present, brings her a gift. She opens it up, and it is the Annabelle doll, a doll she apparently has been searching for. It gets pride and place in the nursery, and then lo and behold, some creepy things start happening. Initially, their neighbours are murdered by what would seem to be a cult. The cult, after murdering their neighbours, then take an active interest in her doll. She commits suicide over the doll, and then following on from that incident, a lot of creepy things start happening that are associated with the Annabelle doll. That puts her life and the lives of her family in direct danger. Right, what are my thoughts on Annabelle? Well, this was the second film to be released, I believe, in the Conjuring Universe sequence of films. I thought it was The Conjuring, then The Conjuring 2, but no, it's The Conjuring, then they did Annabelle in 2014. And it made sense. After the success of The Conjuring, one of the creepy aspects of the Conjuring film was the sequence at the beginning when we were introduced to Annabelle. So it kind of made sense to kind of give Annabelle its own film. And as we know now, Annabelle itself has had a trilogy of films, which I will cover on this channel. So this came out in 2014. And even though it was a success at the box office, quite a big success from my knowledge anyway, it wasn't well received by critics, certainly. I think audiences enjoyed it a little bit more, but certainly critics weren't keen on it. Which has always kind of surprised me a little bit because, like I say, I'm rewatching all the Conjuring films to cover them on the channel, the ones that I haven't covered already anyway. And I've always actually quite enjoyed this film. I've always thought it was quite effective. I don't think it's perfect. I think there are issues with it, but I think maybe it's because the success of The Conjuring, following that, they were maybe expecting something similar, and they don't. They kind of get like a standalone story here with the Annabelle at the centerpiece. But I've always thought it quite effective, this film. I do think there are some sequences in the film that are really effective. When the baby's in direct danger, there's a sequence in the film where like there's books falling off a shelf onto almost hitting the baby that I think is really nicely filmed and put together. The sequence where she's looking under the door and the Annabelle doll falls, and almost like looking back at her, is very effective. The sequence when she goes down to the basement and she's like confronted with this demon, while if you analyse that doesn't make a lot of sense, it's bloody scary. And I watched this with my wife and my son, who's starting to really get into horror films now. And they were both, cacking it at a certain point watching this film. I think there's some decent tricks in this film that certainly work. There's also things, obviously, that don't work in this film. The Alfie Woodard character feels very, very forced. And indeed, certainly my son, when we're watching this, kept commenting that, who is this woman? Why is she here? All this kind of stuff. And yeah, it didn't necessarily work. And I think it probably would have been better to develop that relationship between her and the Annabelle Wallis character better, so that what happens at the end is far more impactful than it actually is. It feels telegraphed, it feels predictable what happens at the end. And I think that was a missed opportunity there. I think they could have made aspects of the film much more impactful, I think, anyway. What I do like about the fact that we've got 3 Annabelle films is certainly the next one, the Annabelle Creation, I think, improves this film. When you see like Annabelle Creation and how that film ends, that kind of almost leads directly into the first Annabelle. I think they kind of work in tandem much better, and I thought that was really quite creative. And I think many people would agree that Annabelle Creation is easily the best Annabelle film. And I would agree with that. I think Annabelle Creation is very, very good indeed. But I also quite like this one. I really do. I think Annabelle Wallis, who's turning into a little bit of a scream queen, I suppose. She's done a decent amount of horror films now. She was in Malignant last year that I know a lot of people were very divided on, but I really liked that James Wan film. I thought it was really fun and creative, even if it was a bit bonkers. So I think she's a good actress. I think she's very effective in this film. I think she plays the role very well. And I bought her of her relationship with the Ward Horton character, her husband John. I thought it was pretty good how they did that. There's some interesting side characters. There's the Tony Amendola character, Father Perez, who we meet again in The Curse of La Llorona, which is why that film is connected to the Conjuring universe, even though it kind of isn't in some ways. He plays the same character. And I thought he had a fairly effective role, certainly to give one of the best scares in the film anyway, when he takes the doll away from them and the doll's having none of it, should we say. So I think this is a decent film. I think it probably gets a bad rap. I think it was maybe released too soon after the first Conjuring film, maybe. And while it's not perfect, there are problems with it. There's some pacing issues. I think there's some characters that needed more work. But I do think there are some fun, effective scares in this film. I think when you consider some of the really poor horror films that we've had over the last few years that just are paint by, are just very generic tick box exercises, I think this one certainly stands above them anyway. So I think it's a pretty decent one. So I'll be watching Annabelle Creation next and putting up for a review for that one too on the channel. But I do hope you enjoyed this review. Let me know in the comments what you thought of Annabelle and the Conjuring films in general. And of course, I will be back with loads more reviews and content on the channel very, very soon.